My father was an American citizen that his company from New York had sent to Vienna because they had opened a new office for the European countries in Vienna. My father was a translator, and he was fluent in German. So that's why he was in Vienna, and there he met my mother, a Jewish Viennese woman, and they got married, and then they stayed in Vienna. And when I was born, he registered my birth at the American consulate, and I immediately became an American citizen on my father's papers, it was called. And later that saved my life.
Wow. Oh, here's your, yeah.
Oh, that was in elementary school. This is me here.
This guy right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot how old I was in that.
You look like you're 8 or 9.
Something like
yeah,
that.
8 or 9 when you
And
think
our
so.
teachers, this one that was, her name was Fiala, and the other teacher was Joseph Jacks. They were socialists. They introduced me to socialism. The young people from there went into socialist youth groups, like the Red Falcons. This is one in the gymnasium in Vienna. And
Right.
that was the school run by the Austrian reactionaries. They call themselves Christian Christian Democrats, but they were sympathizers of the Austrian fascists. And this guy was a miserable guy, fascist, Professor Pesta. This is me here.
Yeah.
I was always one of the smallest guys in the thing. This was the smallest one.
This guy is giving this guy not a nice look, or maybe he just happens to be looking that way. Doesn't have a very friendly look towards his teacher.
Yeah, he was a miserable bastard. There was one time, he was also our English teacher. So, he was teaching us, and he used me to help him teach, and I liked that. So, he said different things. I don't know how it came to that. And he said something, he asked me something that I could not know, but I know he was trying to teach us. So I was just going to say, I'm sorry, but I don't know. So one of the guys, maybe I find him. Here, this guy.
Uh-huh.
I forgot his name, but he blurted out and said, he can't know that. And the professor thought it was me who said that. And he turned to me and said, do you want me to slap you with this book? And I stood up and said, look, you're mistaken. Whatever happened here, I didn't say anything. And you're mistaken in yelling at me and threatening me. The class was astounded because in those days you didn't talk to a professor like that. So he said, well, who said it? He says, well, I have no right. I'm not going to tell you. He said, sit down. All right, that was the end of that.
Wow.
But the guys in the class, they respected me for that.
Yeah, for you standing up and defending yourself.
It was unheard of in those days. Now, I had this fighting spirit already.
Wow. So, did he treat you differently because you were Jewish or anything?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Not openly.
Yeah.
The director of the gymnasium was a well-known Nazi. His name was Franz Schubert. No relation to the composer. And one day I was, and the whole family lived in the school. So he had 2 grown sons who were Nazis. They were a big Nazi button already under the Austrian Republic. So one day I was on a streetcar, on a platform. I was reading a book by Heine. I think it was Book of Songs. I was standing there reading. So one of his sons, I think his name was Heinz, he got on a different stop and he saw me there. So I ignored him, and that he talked to me. He said, Jew boy, are you reading your Bible? I still ignored him. So he came over and tried to knock the book out of my hand, so I put the book inside my shirt, and he pushed me. So I hauled off, and I hit him hard as I could in the face. And I was more surprised than he was. Now, he sat down on the floor, and with his nose was bleeding. And the next stop was my stop. And I said, Auf Wiedersehen, Heinz, and I got off. So he jumped out after me and started to fight, and I held him off. I had to learn, I learned how to box a little, and I knew jiu-jitsu. That was the karate in those days. And at that moment, there was a movie house on the corner, and a lot of people came out. And they saw this big guy and this little guy fighting, and the little guy was punching the big guy. The big guy couldn't do anything. And the people said, stop, stop. So I said, I want to stop, but he doesn't. So that went on for a while, and he finally left.
Wow.
And the next day, the head director called me in, and he said, you were fighting with Heinz last night. I said, yes. He says, did you hit Heinz? I said, yes, sir, as hard as I could. He said, well, you were fighting on the streets, and I recommend that you leave the school. So I said, look at right there, I want to continue my education. Your son was just as much involved in fighting as I was. I didn't complain to anybody. So he said, well, let's forget it, go back to your class. But he didn't forget. All of a sudden, my marks dropped in math and in botany. The director was teaching botany. And the whole school knew that it was after me. So somebody overheard one of the big Nazis, the big Nazi bully in the school. His name was Buxbaum. He heard him talk out in the hall to the head director. He told him, look, everybody likes him, and I beat him up a few days ago, which was true. He needed 3 stitches, and he couldn't go to the gym or play football for a week, but he never complained to anybody. And besides that, we need him on the soccer team. That coming from the Nazi, the school. But it didn't work. That didn't work. So I had to pass 2 tests at the end of the school, in math and in botany. So another professor was there, and the head director was there, while I was taking that, and I passed those tests with flying colors, and then I quit the school. I quit. And I went to a business school for a year, and then I got a good job at a big company as a correspondent in the advertising department. This was my best friend Walter, that I had known since I was 8 years old. And we used to go skiing and swimming and hiking together, and we belonged to a youth group of the Social Democratic Party, the Red Falcons. They were kids from 7 to 17, and we had great expectations and idealism, and we thought the Social Democrats are going to get more votes every election, and everything will be better for working people, and eventually we will have a socialist democracy in Austria. Peaceful meetings of Social Democrats were attacked by the fascists, sometimes shot, and at one time 3 of them were caught. When 3 people were killed, they were brought to trial and they were acquitted. That happened every time. So we tried to tell the Social Democratic, the leaders, that we should bring our defense force that was founded when the Republic was founded, of 60,000 armed men, out on the street in a peaceful march, and show our strength and stop the fascists from attacking us. But I guess the leaders of the Social Democratic Party, that William Shirer called the most decent men and women in Europe, they couldn't imagine how vicious the fascists would be, and they said, we don't want any bloodshed and we don't want any demonstrations. Looking back was another wrong blood was shed. On February 12, 1934, the fascists attacked. With the help of the police and the military, and their first things they attacked that was most important to them were the beautiful houses, the housing that the Social Democrats had built for working class people, that were known all over the world as a model. And these buildings are still standing today, and people living in. They had sunny apartments with balconies, there were libraries, there were playgrounds, the kids could get balls and bicycles, whatever they wanted from a building, and play, and it was a good way of life. It wasn't just buildings, it was
communities,
a way of to show that we could have a better life for working class people. It was a means of showing a better life for the future. So that's why those buildings were attacked. And in those buildings lived just families. They didn't have weapons. And many of them were just killed. Many people were massacred by that. And Walter and some others of my friends, there were 4 of us, 4 men and 4 young women. We joined the fight. We fought back for a week, and we fought our way in one of those buildings and in one of the apartments, and we put carpets and furniture, mattresses against the windows to deflate the bullets and keep the glass from flying. The women took care of the wounded. There were already dead people in other apartments. And after a week, we ran out of food and ammunition, and then we had a shortwave radio, but it was hit by machine gun bullets, and it could not be repaired, so we had no idea what was going on outside. So after a week, some people left and got in touch with some of the Social Democratic leaders. Some of them had fled to Prague, to Czechoslovakia. Some of them had been already murdered, and the word was to give up, to try and save as many lives as possible, and just go home if you still had a home. This is Walter again, sometime later. No, in the meantime, no, that under the Austrian fascists, we were not caught at that time fighting back, but we were arrested 2 years later for printing and distributing anti-government newspapers and leaflets, and the charge was treason. And I was in solitary for 9 months, and once a week the Austrian secret police would pick me up, take me to the headquarters to question me, and then took me back. I liked those questioning because it gave me a chance to get out of my cell. They put me in a van. The windows were painted black. I scratched off the paint and I could look out on the street and saw people and shops and whatever was going on the street, and it was a break for me. And I didn't tell him anything anyhow, so that went on for a while, and then they gave up on that.
They didn't torture you or anything? They just questioned you?
The Austrian fascists, did not.
No. Wow, that's remarkable. That's a bloody
Well,
good thing.
they did stupid little things that didn't really bother me. So they put me on for a whole day on bread and water. I loved that bread, and I just laughed at them. Well, the wasn't torture, but I was not allowed to have anything to read. No newspapers, no books. I was not allowed to get mail or visitors. So I would walk up and down, and it was a 10 by 5 foot cell. I would walk up and down and talk to myself. I still do that. And then, all the people, most of the people in the underground knew the Morse code. So once in a while I tapped on the wall to the next cell, and I guess it was empty, there was no answer. But one day I got an answer. And there was another political prisoner, a 30-year-old librarian, and we talked to each other, so I wasn't alone anymore. And one day he had an idea. He said, we could play chess. I said, how are you going to play chess? He said, you have a square wooden stool in your cell? Yeah, I have. I said, yes. I said, well, take a spoon and scratch like a chessboard on it, and then we'll make the chess figures out of bread and water. You form it out of water and you put them down. We did that, and then with Morse code, we put down, we knocked on the wall and put down what we were moving, what figure to what field, and we played chess. A game like that sometimes took a few weeks. It was something to do, and in the meantime we also talked. And then after 9 months, the so-called trial was scheduled. And our attorney, he was a Quaker, and he volunteered to defend us without any payment. And he told us that the charge was treason, and we probably would be sentenced to 5 years. But the prisons were so overcrowded with political prisoners that they would declare an amnesty in 2 years, and we would all get out. And that's what really happened. And at the trial, something great happened. Well, the prosecutor was reading one of my articles in the paper that we distributed about the vicious attacks of the fascists of murdering people and how people were fighting back. And the prison guard that had brought me from my cell to the courtroom was sitting in back of me. And he listened to all that, and suddenly he yelled out, "But that's all true." And the courtroom, most of the people in there were friends of ours. They broke out laughing and applauding. And the prosecutor wanted to know who said that. But the judge was a pretty decent man. He said, "Never mind, we have to go on with this trial." And I figured, well, maybe it was all worth it. Mm-hmm. It was really, it helped. So we got out after 2 years, and it was a fairly peaceful time. We started again with the leaflets and the newspapers. And then on March 13th...
What year is this we're talking about?
Now I'm at 1938.
Mm-hmm.
And the real nightmare began on March 13th of 38 when Hitler's troop marched into Austria, or the so-called Anschluss. Not one shot was fired. Most of the Austrians welcomed him with open arms. And I immediately left my parents' apartment. But I knew that the Austrian fascist government had already Nazis in the government. The most well-known of them was, his name was Seyss Inquart. He was very important, one of the leaders of the Nazi party, a friend of Adolf. And so I knew that they would hand their file over to the Gestapo. So I left home immediately, and I found a shelter in an abandoned note house on a lake, still within the city limits of the Vienna, but on the other side of the Danube. Walter had many Nazis, he had about 5 or 6 Nazi uniforms. He figured it might come in handy. And he was so right. Because what we did, we liberated food from German army depots, and we distributed for needy people. And the most needy people at that time were Jewish people, because they were not allowed to have an apartment, have a job, not even sit on a bench in the park. All the benches had a sign on it, "Not for Jews." But Jews were not the only ones. The first ones that Hitler went after were the communists and socialists, because in Germany the Communist Party was very strong, and they were really the only people in Germany that fought against Hitler taking over. So there were 8 of us. There were four men and 4 women, 4 Jews and 4 Christians. We were a very integrated party. We decided to stay in the underground because we felt we had no choice. We had to fight back. Especially for me, being Jewish, I could have been hiding somewhere. They could have found me anyway and killed me. So we felt we wanted to fight back. So we provided food and shelters and clothing for Jewish people and for political people that the Gestapo was looking for. And there were communists, socialists, Jehovah's Witnesses, mentally retarded people, gays, lesbians, and any Austrian or German who had not signed up with the Nazi Party was their enemy. On the first day, they marched in on March 13th. On the following day, I already left home, but I was riding on my bicycle near the University of Vienna, and there was great commotion, and I came close and looked, and there were Nazi students having a lot of fun. They were laughing and joking, and they were throwing Catholic priests and Jewish students from third-floor windows. That was on the first day. And then I saw they were murdering and torturing people right out on the street. And that also happened. That was going on all the time as soon as they took over. And sometimes it was so bad that some of the German soldiers would stop the Viennese Nazis from torturing people on the street. So the most important thing we did was to get people out of the country into neighboring countries. And Czechoslovakia would take in people. We could talk to the border guards there, and they would take him. The other country that took people in was Mussolini's, at that time, fascist Italy. Italian families would take Jewish people and political people in, and also Yugoslavia. So Walter would show up once in a while with a German staff car. It was an open roadster, and most of the roads were dirt roads. So the roadster was equipped with white canvas coats, goggles, and caps, and blankets to protect the passenger from dust. And we would put two people behind the front seat and in front of the back seat on the floor and cover them with those white blankets. Walter would have an SS uniform. I was sitting in back on a tall pillow. I looked tall, had goggles, and had a German uniform jacket and a cap. And we carried our guns. We had 9mm Mausers that we had liberated from the Austrian fascists. And sometimes we were stopped by German soldiers, but Walter would yell at them and said we had an important mission for a general. I forgot what name he used, General so-and-so, and we did not have time to stop. And they would yell at the soldiers and said, "What's your name, your name, your name?" And I'll report you. And they always said, go on, it's all right. We never got caught. But we weren't the only ones who did that. I know of another group of people. They had a German general's uniform. And at one time they went through 15 German checkpoints with that car. Were not caught.
Oh my God.
So it took courage.
Oh my goodness.
It took courage and inventive things, and also be a little crazy. A lot could be done.
Yeah.
So, and when we came near the borders, Walter would stay with the car, and I would walk across the border with the people. And I'll never forget this. The look at their faces, the tears in their eyes. The men would look through their pockets for money and take off wristwatches. The women would look for jewelry. And when I told them, we are not doing this for money, they couldn't believe it. They said, they didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
They hugged me, they cried, and they said, "You two are angels." I said, "I'm really not an angel, but this this was much better than any kind of other reward, just to remember their faces." So we got a lot of people out like that. And that's the best thing we did.
Where did Walter get all these cars and the uniforms and everything? He wasn't a Nazi, was he?
No. He was the perfect symbol of an Aryan youth. He was tall, blond, and blue-eyed. And no, he was a socialist. No, we were in the Socialist Party. And at that time, after February 12th, the Communist Party gained members by the tens of thousands. And I had joined I was only 10 years old. No, but before all this, I had joined the Communist Party. But after February 12th, they were really great, and they were the most part of the underground. But the Austrian underground was really pathetic compared to other countries' underground. But no, we did what we could. So Walter, I don't know what gave him the idea to steal those uniforms. But he did, and it came in real handy.
Mm-hmm. Did he steal the car too?
No, he didn't steal that car. I didn't want to know how he got it. All I knew is he had friends in a German motor pool, and they would disconnect the odometer so it wouldn't show any additional kilometers. And I didn't want to know anymore, because I said what I didn't know I couldn't tell.
So he borrowed the car.
He borrowed it. There was one German army depot where we found out that for about 15 minutes, between midnight and 12:15, there were no guards there. So we worked very fast and dragged out as many cases of food that we had and put them in a car and took off. So whenever we ran out of food, we went back and got more, and it worked.
Amazing luck you had.
Yeah, luck helped.
Yeah, you had amazing. I mean, here you are alive to show for it. I mean, there were many that probably did the same thing as you and were caught and killed, you know?
Yeah,
So
there was even another American. His name was Hans Hirsch. He had the same thing. He was an American citizen on his father's papers in Germany, and the same thing with underground newspapers, and they killed him with a guillotine. They chopped his head off. Yeah, we were lucky.
You were lucky, all right.
We had a mimeograph machine in the apartment of two young members of the Social Democratic Party, and their father was a lawyer, and they had a penthouse apartment in the 3rd district, and the apartment of the parents was on one floor, and the penthouse was on the top floor. And they had lived there for many, many years. And their grandmother, in 1918, when the Austrian Republic was founded, that she was afraid that the communists would take the family jewels, and she had a secret compartment built behind the closet. And that's where we put our printing machine, and nobody ever found it, not the Austrian fascists and not the Gestapo. Nobody ever found it. And one day I came to the apartment. I know the two brothers were Hans and Karl. Hans and Karl expected me, so I rang the bell, the upstairs bell, nobody answered, so I rang the downstairs bell, and they had a housekeeper. The housekeeper knew of our activities. She opened the door and said, "Run, run! The secret police is upstairs searching." And before she had finished talking, I was already halfway down the stairs, and on the street I met Karl, Hans's brother, who also came with stencils and other material to be printed. And we waited for an hour, and then Karl called, and Hans answered the phone, and they said, "Have the people finished cleaning the apartment?" He said, "Yes, you can come home." So we found out what had happened. The penthouse had large windows from the floor to the ceiling. They had drapes in front of them. And the secret police, they were in a big hurry to pull the drapes. They didn't use the pull cords. They just pulled the drapes aside, and they got caught. One of the drapes got caught in the bell, and the bell didn't work. And that's how they didn't know that I was ringing the bell.
Wow. So amazing luck, amazing luck.
So after that, we celebrated, went back and started printing again.
Amazing. So you're speaking for the people who were not so lucky as you.
Yeah, that's why, like, who said that? Elie Wiesel said that.
Yeah.
Says, "For the living and the dead, you must be a witness." This is me in, that's already under the Hitler regime.
Uh-huh.
It must have been around, must have been in 38.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. There you are. And where are you standing? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's outside Vienna, somewhere in the Vienna woods, and Walter was there with his girlfriend, and I with my girlfriend Lou Marie. We went on there on bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with all the terror and everything, though, we still had some fun.
Yeah. Well, you were still kids.
Yeah. So our our Christian friends would go and get tickets for movie houses and theaters, and then we could go in with their tickets and saw a show or a play. And then we left leaflets on the seats when we left. So it wasn't all just terror. It was we had fun too.
All right, here's a
This is a picture from my driver's license that the Austrian fascists were able, after that license, and the Gestapo, and I still have that license. Right, you have it with the pictures.
Right, actually this is, here it is.
Yeah, here is my driver's
license.
Führerschein.
Führerschein.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
No.
Führerschein?
Führer is a driver.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Führerschein.
That was. Yeah.
Did you have to have ID that said you were Jewish?
Hmm?
Did you have to carry ID that said you were Jewish? Identification. Did you have to carry identification?
I never carried one. I had a tiny little American flag on my coat.
Oh, so that.
And I had a paper from the American consulate that they were under their protection.
Wow.
With my picture and the big seal from the consulate. That saved me once.
So you didn't have to carry identification saying that you were Jewish?
I didn't.
You didn't. You were supposed to?
Yeah, but many Jewish people didn't.
Uh-huh.
Not in Vienna. They didn't.
Right. Uh-huh.
this is much later. This is during World War II. I was, well, I should explain how I got to be a paratrooper. When Hitler invaded and took over Austria and other countries, the OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, the Office of Strategic Services, they approached me and asked me to come to their office, and they wanted to know if I would be willing to go behind the Austrian lines and have contact with the underground. And I said yes. So they gave me a few weeks of training. I had parachute training, and all that was all set. And then suddenly they called me and said they didn't need me anymore. I think they read my file finally, and they didn't went too crazy about sending me in there. At this time, I was in the 11th Airborne, and we made jumps in the Philippines, on Leyte and Mindanao, and underground, we were infantry. I was in the 188th Infantry of the 11th Airborne. And there, the main part of the Japanese army had already left. There were small groups of Japanese infantry, and there were a lot of snipers in trees, and this was what they were called. They called it mopping up thing. So to help clean the Philippines of the Japanese army. And then I came to Japan, and they were training us further. We still had to jump from planes and like wartime training, and then they gave us lectures. They said, we don't want to go to lectures anymore. I said, yeah, we had to. So in the beginning, we all wore sunglasses and were sleeping, but they woke us up.
So this is in the end. This is during the occupation in 45 and 46.
Yes, we were with one of the first troops to enter Japan. Tokyo was a heap of rubble, just with regular bombs.
Yeah, I know, they devastated.
A heap of rubble. So we were stationed in Sendai. It was about 200 miles north of Tokyo, also facing on the ocean. And then the lectures were about starting a war with the Soviet Union.
Really?
Yeah. So I talked to my Captain Hill from Georgia. He was a very decent guy. I said, look, we went through all this war to stop the wars, and now we're getting lectures about the war with the Soviet Union. He says, I don't want to jump anymore. I don't want to be in an army now again and starting a new war. What can I do? He says, look, you are in a volunteer outfit, in the paratroopers. I will see, maybe you can get out of it. And if you can, I'll go with you.
Wow.
He had enough of the war too.
Well, this is crazy. I mean, we were going to start a war with one of our allies.
Yeah, well, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
they got strong again.
the CIA,
Yeah.
they could have stopped Hitler in Spain, and the CIA was always on the side of the fascist elite.
Yeah. Ooh,
So
well, that's something not many people probably know.
this was in basic training in Spartanburg, North Carolina. No, the American army in those days was segregated. We were
Yes.
fighting a war for democracy, but the army was segregated. And can you see me in the picture?
Let's see.
It's hard.
Oh, yeah, there you
Yeah,
are.
that's me.
Yep, yep, I picked you out before, I
Yeah.
remember that, yeah.
Well, I had an emergency leave from there, and my father was dying at that time in New York, so I got to leave. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes since he was young, and that got to him. He was 75 and he died. He came back. We got the Jewish women out to England where they worked on farms. And the one on the left is my girlfriend, Lo Marie. She got a job. She was working on a farm in England. And the Christian women we got out to Argentina. That's what this picture is about.
Wow. Were they political, the Christian women?
Yes.
Yeah, so they...
They were from our underground group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had to get out.
Yeah, the Gestapo was looking for them.
Oh, wow.
I had this hideout in an abandoned boathouse on a lake within the Vienna city limits. And a few days before that, my girlfriend and her parents invited me to spend a few days at their place. They own property and a house outside of Vienna, in the Vienna woods. Her father was selling machinery for warplanes and for private industry. And he was already in, they were Christians, and he was already in trouble with the Gestapo because he didn't sign up with the Nazi party. So I told my girlfriend, look, if I come out there, and they find me there, it's going to be very bad for you and your family. But they insisted, so I was very careful to get there on my bicycle, and it was spent 3 days there, and 3 days and nights. I called it now vacation from hell.
Mm-hmm.
I could sleep in a bed without my gun, and people were great. We ate at a table. My girlfriend and I went on a walk through the woods. It was just wonderful. But after 3 days, I had to go back. So it was about kilometers. It was about 20 miles from there to my hideout place. So I got there, it was already after dark. There was a full moon. It was so beautiful out on the lake. So I watched that for a while, and then I went into that boathouse. It had no running water. So I always brought water on my bicycle in buckets from a nearby hydrant. There was like a hydrant with a water pump some distance away. And I turned the lights on. There was electricity in there. I put the lights on, and I see I had left water, I know, in a basin and a pitcher that was gone. And there were coffee beans on a counter. I had not left coffee beans on the counter. Somebody had been there. And I felt now that I should leave. I should get ahead of the story and explain what had happened, that my friends knew that I wouldn't mind. The man that was there was a well-known German anti-fascist who had first fled to Austria, and then he was in trouble again when Austria was taken over by the Nazis. He needed a place to hide, and they were sure I wouldn't mind if he would come there. Somehow they traced him, or somebody reported that someone was there. Maybe he wasn't as careful as I was, I don't know. They were looking for him, not for me.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So at night, I was very uneasy with that. Well, I'll leave in the morning. I didn't even take my shoes off that night. So in the middle of the night, I hear cars coming up a dirt road, and I peek out the window, and there are two cars. And I see Gestapo and SS get out of the cars. My gosh, two cars, 6 Gestapo and SS just for me? I couldn't believe it. So I ran down. No, there was a rowboat down on a little pier. So I got in the boat. I took one of the oars and pushed myself ahead on the side of the lake. It was overhanging trees were there, and then I came to a part where there are no more trees, and it was a bright moonlit night. What was I going to do? So I got out of the boat and I started to run. I was running towards the river, and I figured maybe I can get to the bridge and into the city. And then I heard shouts and running behind me, stop or I'll shoot, and I kept running. And somebody was shooting and came pretty close past my ears, so I threw myself on the ground and I rolled over a few times, and I was lying underground. Took my gun out like that and looked, and there was an SS officer coming. And I fired at him, and he went down. I never knew, did I hit him? Did he throw himself down to protect himself? I just kept going. And then when I was running along the river, I heard voices yelling and dogs barking. And I know they were really after me now. And then I came to a pier at a fisherman's cabin right underwater. And there were 2 boats. One boat was like a regular boat in the water. The other boat was upside down. So I figured the only way I could escape from the dogs was if I would be under the water. Maybe I could hide under the boat. Maybe there's enough air in there. So I ran past there and went into the water and swam under the boat and grabbed a seat, and tilting my head back there was enough room to air to breathe. And I should have mentioned I was too tired to swim across the Danube. I used to swim in it, but I was tired, and I didn't have time to take any clothes off. So that was my second choice. And I was there for a long time. It seemed a long time to me. And there was a lot of noise. The water was cold, and I was pumping from side to side. But I didn't know what was going on outside. So after a long time, I came up and peeked and listened. It was all quiet. They were all gone. Nobody was there. So I went through a window. I went through a window into that fisherman's cabin, and I found some blankets in the corner. I took my clothes off, and I put a line across the cabin. I put my paper money and my driver's license up there, and I went to sleep. The next morning, I put on my wet clothes and shoes and stuff, and I went towards the bridge, and I didn't want to go to a regular trolley stop. So I jumped on. Well, the streetcar was moving, and I paid my fare and got to the city. But in the city, I couldn't find a friend to ride, so I lost everything. I lost my bicycle, I lost whatever clothes I had, ammunition that I had, stuff to clean my gun. Everything was lost. And I couldn't find a friend I could stay with overnight, so I decided to go to my parents' apartment. I went there after dark, so none of the neighbors would see me. And my father was very much surprised to see me. And I explained to him that I lost my hiding place and I would stay for one night, maybe 2, and find another place. So I said, that's all right, but your bed is taken. I found out they were not in the underground, but they were hiding 11 people.
Wow.
It was a rather large apartment. It was actually 2 apartments. My parents and I had lived there, and my brother with his wife and son had also lived there. So I said, well, that's fine. I'll sleep under the dining room table. And that's what I did. So I should go a little ahead of this, what happened then. Our neighbor was a Catholic railroad worker. He was a social democrat. He was anti-Nazi. And there was a square yard where the bathroom windows went out to. And his bathroom window was across from ours. And I had, was about 4 or 5 feet across. I had a 7-foot plank, and he had agreed with me that in case I need to, I could push that plank across, get into his apartment, walk out his front door, and get away. So I had that choice. That plank was still in the bathroom. But at 4 o'clock, the knock came. I knew already who it was. Who comes at 4 o'clock knocking on the door? It was the Gestapo. My father opened the door and said, you can't come in. I'm an American citizen. This is my home. So the 2 Gestapo men pulled their guns, forced their way in, and asked for me, my name. So I figured I better come out and introduce myself, because if I don't, they'll search the apartment. They find all those people, and my parents, American citizens or not, they're going to be in big trouble. So I came out and introduced myself. They were very happy to see me. They didn't search anymore. And had a limousine waiting for me downstairs. They got very good service to Gestapo headquarters. That's how I got there.
That's how you got to the 2-year place?
So I haven't told that story yet in full in the past. I told that I was there and the American consulate got me out after 6 weeks. I hadn't told that I was tortured there. They knew something about smuggling people out of the country, and they wanted to know more. They had suspicions, but no proof. But I was ready for that. I had talked to people who went through that, and they told me, at first tell them you have no idea what you are talking about, and then don't say anything else. Because if you're in pain and you talk, they'll pick something up that you say. They're very smart at that, and they can get more information out of you. Don't say anything else. Don't cry out. Don't beg. Say nothing. And that's what I did. And I don't want to tell the whole thing they did. It was, part of it was electric shots, and hitting the bottom of my feet with blackjack, so the would open up and blood would spurt out, and the pain would go through my whole body into my head. And then at night they would throw me in a cell with concrete floor and walls, and there was a frame of a bed hooked up to the wall with a thin mattress top. So I clothed myself up on that, and I let the mattress down, and I fell down on that. And I said I could get water from the toilet, but the toilet was filthy. So the people who told me what they did said that if you have no food or drink after 3 days, drink your urine. And that's what I did. And just lately I asked my doctor about it. He explained to me how the urine helped me, but I still don't understand how it worked, but it did. At the third day, no, I made believe I was unconscious, and I could not see the shadows through my closed eyes. When they bent over me, I stopped breathing too. And then I heard him talking, and he said, well, if he hasn't said anything, he really doesn't know anything. And then they threw me in a cell with 34 people. They were all Jewish people they had picked up on the street. Their relatives, their friends did not know what had happened, and they told me that they're pretty sure it was a transport to a concentration camp. So they was there, and they took care of me. One of the guys had smuggled in one of those flat flasks of liquor he had smuggled in under his shirt. And they put some of that alcohol on pieces of clothing and put on my feet. And that took care of the infection. And then they wrapped clothing around my feet, and after a couple of days I could walk again. And then I was in there for almost another 6 weeks, and then my father put pressure on the American consulate, and then I found out they had made a deal with the Gestapo that a Gestapo man would take me to the Swiss border. So that's what happened.
Whew. So then you went from Switzerland to the United States?
Yeah, but the trip was also very interesting.
Wow.
One day, somebody knocks on the door. It was a Viennese policeman, and has a package for me, and he said, there's clean clothes and stuff, and razor, and clean yourself up and get dressed. Somebody's waiting for you downstairs. So I opened the package, like he said, it was clean underwear and shirts and the suit, razor, and that German anti-fascist who was supposed to be hiding in my hiding place, he was there too in that cell. I only knew his underground name. He didn't tell the Gestapo that his underground name was Zipper. He was there too. And we talked and talked and found out that he was supposed to be in my underground, in my boathouse. Small world.
Yes. Yeah.
So he looked and he said, they forgot one thing to send you. I said, what? There's a hacksaw.
Excellent.
So we left. What happened to him later? He joined the Marquis. They caught him in France and shot him. He didn't make it.
Mm.
But anyway, so
What is the Marquis?
Marquis.
the French underground.
So and he was
He
caught there.
joined them. Yeah.
And he was caught in France.
Yeah.
It looked like an area.
Walter?
Yeah, Walter.
He was conscripted into the German army and sent to the Russian front. And he had one of those in English, in the American army. I had one like that, a Browning semi-automatic. It had a little tripod in front. He had one of those guns. And when they came into combat, he was shooting in the air. They never caught him doing that. And then he got caught by the Russian army, a prisoner of war, and he escaped. And he got back to Vienna, but he had to move because his neighbors found out that he was anti-Nazi during the war and gave him a hard time, so he had to move to a different part of the city.
Wow.
But he survived.
Yeah.
We all survived.
It's amazing, yeah.
All 8 of us.
Yeah. All 8 of you survived. That's remarkable. Very remarkable.
How many of you are still alive?
Hmm?
Or how many of you are still alive?
Do you keep in contact with your friends?
I'm the only one now.
You're only
My girlfriend Marie died at 87 in Switzerland.
Mm.
I'm the only one.
Hmm.
There was a very small store there. There was a Jewish man who had a butcher shop there, and he had 2 daughters. They were 22 and 24 years old, 2 beautiful young women. And they had a big cart with a big box, and it was supposed to be pulled by a horse. It had 2 big wooden arms sticking out, but they pulled that cart by themselves, and they had a small. There were like municipal gardens there where people grew vegetables and stuff. So they went there every morning and brought fresh vegetables and stuff in that cart to the store. So I walked by that store. It was on a Sunday, and the store was closed. Not in Vienna, they had these steel roll balken, they called it, but it was small, narrow pieces of steel they could roll up and roll down and then put padlocks up.
Like in the city?
Yeah, they have
Like
that.
in the city?
Yeah, they have the same thing
So
in New York
yes,
City.
yes,
yeah,
they
still
have.
yet.
Now they have them here too.
Yeah.
So it was closed, but I heard terrible screams coming from there. So I knew there was an entrance in the back. There was a yard where the daughters usually came with the car to unload. So I went around there and opened the door carefully, and I saw 2 SS men having the butcher on the butcher block, chopping off pieces of his left arm and laughing and telling him they were making him kosher. And I took my gun out. They hadn't seen me yet. They had their backs turned towards me. And I shot them both in the head and killed them.
Wow.
And I talked to him. He was still alive. And I told him that I promised him I will take his 2 daughters out. And they say, he told me, now I can die in peace. They died. And I put the 2 SS guy in that cart, and they pulled it out. And the back of the house bordered on the what they call Donau Canal. It was a side arm of the Danube, but the water was steep, so the freighters from the Danube could pull in there and come near the city, and they had warehouses down there. And there was a big ramp for horse-drawn carts going down all the way to the canal. So I pulled that cart all the way there, and then I hold on in the back, turned it around and hold on to those 2 arms and ran down with it to the canal and let it run right into the water. The cart and everything with them in it. And it sank into the canal. That's my other story. And I got his 2 daughters out.
Mm-hmm.
I got him to a town in Italy, Fiume, not too far from the border. I made an extra trip in there to get him right to the family who would take him in. It was a Christian family.
Right.
Those people risked their lives every day. The Italian people took people in every day and risked their lives. And after that, political people and Jewish people, anybody who was hunted by the Gestapo. And when the war had started, they took in Allied flyers who had been shot down.
Right.
Italian people were terrific. So that's my other story. I mean, if I tell too much, don't tell me, because
No.
I can
No
talk
problem.
all day and all night.
No problem.
I think we have about 40 hours of tape, so
Yeah,
we got plenty of
and
tape.
and there's a store where we can buy more.
Yep.
I started a talk yesterday at the post office.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was buying some stamps, and I had a birthday card for Nadia, who's now in Hawaii. You know,
Yeah.
and I said, I need a stamp for that. Is it the same postage for Hawaii as in the United States? Yes, yeah, it's 39 cents. So I need a stamp for that. So they put down a stamp with a flag. So I says, I don't want that. Says, don't you have any other?
Yeah.
So they said, not loose stamps, but no. One woman there, she's very nice. She said, well, use this stamp. I said, I can't. She says, why? She says, well, look, there was a line of people there waiting. So I said, I'm a combat veteran, and present government, with a loud voice, and the present government is dishonoring the American flag. I'm not going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use it after they are gone. So
Yes.
I looked at Mary. She smiled,
Yeah.
and I walk over to her. She says, she knows she couldn't laugh loud. You know, I understood.
Yeah, right,
So she
yeah.
had this smile on her
Yeah.
face. She said, is this for a birthday? She says, yes. I says, wait a minute. She got a big stamp. It says, happy birthday. And
looked like
then
a card.
I said, I need some 39-cent stamp too. So she said, comes out, lovebirds. I said, perfect.
Perfect. Love
I
birds.
said, Mary, you made my day.
Yes. Yes.
But it was so quiet.
Yeah.
Nobody said a word.
Nobody said a word. Wow.
Not a word.